Hey guys, tonight we're slipping quietly into a palace so gilded, even the shadows have gold trim. You're walking down a corridor lined with purple curtains. Real Tyrian purple, mind you, which costs more than a gladiator's freedom. And the air smells like crushed roses and roasted dormice. Somewhere up ahead, there's a soft clink of silver spoons being stirred into wine and a chorus of carefully timed laughter. Everyone here is laughing because they want to live. At the center of it all is a man draped in silk, wearing sandals crusted with emeralds and a crown of pearls shaped like the rays of the sun. He's young, handsome in that marble statue kind of way, and when he speaks, senators nod so hard their necks nearly snap. His name is Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus. But no one calls him that. You call him Caligula. You won't like what comes next, but then again, no one in Rome did either, and they couldn't change it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where in the world you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You sit in the back of the throne room as Caligula plays with the hem of his robe and asks a visiting noble why his toga isn't ironed. You think that's a joke? It's not. The man will be fined for disrespect. Caligula smiles wide and announces that Jupiter, yes, the god, is jealous of his beauty. Everyone claps, even though most of them suspect Jupiter, if he exists, is rolling his divine eyes. Historians still argue whether Caligula's descent into madness began with illness, power, or something buried deeper. Some say a fever fried his brain early in his reign. Others blame a life drenched in trauma and paranoia. And then there's the fringe theory, less academically loved but far more entertaining, that Caligula wasn't mad at all. He just hated Rome and thought the whole thing was a joke. If that's true, he certainly committed to the bit. You lean against a cold pillar and watch a procession of senators enter, each forced to offer him a gift. One man presents a golden plate. Caligula yawns and says he already has 12. Another brings a book of poetry. Caligula throws it in the fire. But your favorite moment is when a governor from Gaul nervously offers him a prized hunting dog. The emperor pauses, then says, "Too hairy, reminds me of my uncle." The room goes silent. The dog is removed. The governor is never seen again. This is Rome now, but this isn't where it starts. To understand how this barefoot lunatic became the emperor of the known world, you have to walk back through bloodied hallways and silken lies, through childhood trauma and imperial politics so twisted even a corkscrew would give up. You drift back through memory and myth, to the beginning, not of Rome, but of Caligula himself. You're standing outside a tent on the German frontier and it's raining. Not a soft drizzle, but the kind of miserable soaking rain that turns armor into mud magnets. Inside, the general is dead. Poison, perhaps, or pneumonia, or a jealous whisper disguised as a cup of wine. The legions mourn him, but only briefly. War doesn't pause for grief, especially not when the general is Germanicus. You shift your gaze to the small child sitting quietly near the body. He's maybe 6, dressed in miniature armor barely larger than a breastplate for a cat. That's little Gaius, nicknamed Caligula. or Little Boots by the soldiers. The name started as a joke. It stuck like a curse. Growing up the son of Germanicus was like growing up the child of a demigod. Germanicus was beloved, celebrated, and deeply threatening to anyone who liked sitting on thrones. That included Emperor Tiberius, the man technically in charge, and depending on whom you ask, either a paranoid recluse or a master of preemptive assassination. So Caligula's childhood was a political seesaw over a pit of snakes. One minute he's a darling of the public, paraded through cheering cities beside his parents. The next he's being watched by strangers who never blink and always take notes. His mother, Agrippina the Elder, was as ambitious as she was proud. She didn't play court politics, she waged it. You grow up fast when your cousins keep vanishing. By the time Caligula is a teenager, he's watched his mother be exiled, his two older brothers die mysteriously, and his family name dragged through every gutter in Rome. Scholars still debate whether it was grief, fear, or sheer rage that calcified inside him during those years. But something hardens. His smile gets sharper, his eyes stop darting. He starts to watch people the way a falcon watches rabbits. He lives in the shadow of Tiberius, who now rules Rome from the island of Capri, surrounded by statues, astrologers, and a rather unpleasant number of nude boys. Tiberius doesn't care much for Caligula, but oddly he doesn't kill him either. Maybe he sees something familiar in the boy, or maybe the kid's just too useful to throw away. It's during this time that Caligula learns the greatest Roman survival skill: pretend. He becomes what every paranoid emperor loves, a quiet, obedient shadow. He praises Tiberius in public, mimics his speech, listens more than he speaks. He doesn't complain when senators insult his mother. He doesn't cry when his brother's ashes arrive in a sealed urn. He just nods and waits, and meanwhile Rome watches. The public, still mourning Germanicus, treats his son like a living relic. They whisper about him in forums, leave coins for him at shrines, and send him scrolls filled with prayers and warnings. Some even dream that he'll return one day to restore the Republic. You almost feel bad for them, because when Caligula finally gets his turn, it won't be a restoration. It'll be a reckoning. You blink and now you're in a small marble room listening to a tutor read aloud from Homer while Caligula sharpens a stylus with obsessive precision. He doesn't ask questions. He doesn't laugh. He just waits. He's seen the empire's mask slip too many times to believe in honor. He knows Rome isn't built on virtue. It's built on fear, favors, and finely measured revenge. And so he watches, absorbs, and files everything away. Names, faces, who insulted whom, who laughed a little too long. Historians still argue whether Caligula was already unstable as a child, or whether his life simply broke him piece by piece. But by the time Tiberius dies and the empire falls into Caligula's lap, one thing is certain. He has never forgotten a single slight. You're sitting cross-legged in the dirt outside a Roman military camp, squinting up at a child in a perfectly scaled-down cuirass. His sandals are polished, his plumed helmet slightly askew. Around him, grizzled soldiers grin and toast with watered wine, their armor clinking like distant thunder. Someone hands him a tiny wooden sword and the crowd erupts in cheers. That's Caligula again, still gayest to some, little boots to most. He's maybe 7 now, strutting through the ranks like a pint-sized general. And the soldiers, they adore him. He's the son of Germanicus, their fallen hero. His little feet patter beside men who've marched across half the known world. They lift him onto shields, teach him camp songs far too vulgar for his age, and pretend not to notice how he winces when people mention his mother. You're watching the formation of a very specific kind of mask. It's a dangerous education, because unlike tutors with scrolls or courtiers with flattery, the legions teach loyalty that can kill kings, and laughter that hides knives. Caligula learns that charisma, when paired with a sharp memory and a sharper tongue, is almost as good as an army. He learns how to charm, how to imitate, how to play the long game. The fringe historians, those who like to stir pots, point to this period as the moment the performance began. That Caligula, underneath all his future madness, was always acting, always scripting. That the real boy vanished somewhere behind the helmet and never fully came back. He follows the troops across provinces, sitting beside his father on campaign routes that make most adults weep. Mud, blood, snow, siege engines, disease, little Caligula sees it all. But unlike other children of nobility who hide behind palace walls, he thrives in it. Soldiers tell stories of him correcting generals, asking clever questions about strategy, even spotting errors in troop formations. Of course, stories are just that, and Rome loved myth-making more than it loved truth. You walk with him one frozen morning as the army enters a small, stubborn village that's resisting occupation. Caligula watches wide-eyed as the local leaders are dragged out. One of them spits at the centurion. The boy laughs. Later, no one can quite agree on who gave the order, but the village burns before nightfall. That evening, Gaius eats honey cakes beside the fire and hums a nursery tune while the smoke rises. Historians still argue whether that moment actually happened, or whether it was stitched into later biographies by men who hated him. But whether literal or not, it tells a truth. Caligula understood power young, and he learned very early that love from the public is conditional, fleeting. Fear, on the other hand, stays. Back in Rome, the people whisper his name with hope. Germanicus's boy, they say. Maybe he'll save us from the gray creep of Tiberius and his island of moral mildew. Maybe he'll bring back the old honor of the empire. Maybe he'll be sane. You, of course, know better. Still, the Senate begins to prepare. Coins are quietly stamped with the Germanicus line. Temples dust off old busts. Even Tiberius seems aware, if not afraid, of his young ward's potential. Instead of sending Caligula to some quiet exile or poisoned cup, he calls him closer. That's when Capri becomes the cage. You watch the boats approach the island one by one, each carrying a servant, a relative, a hopeful heir. Not all of them leave. The cliffside palace is a honeycomb of beautiful rooms and dark corners. Tiberius lives like a god, but one surrounded by rumors of perverse indulgence, secret trials and baths that never quite seem to empty. And into this world walks teenage Caligula. He keeps quiet. He doesn't flinch when people disappear mid-dinner. He nods when Tiberius quotes philosophers between bites of honeyed dormouse. He learns how to survive in a place where reality bends around power, and truth is whatever the Emperor decides it should be. Stoneface, one servant whispers about him. He never looks surprised. You wonder, sitting beside him on a sun-warmed balcony, if he ever stopped being the boy in armor, or if he just outgrew the costume and let the act swallow the actor. You stand at the edge of a cliff on Capri, gazing down at a sea so blue it looks painted. Behind you rises the sprawling villa of Emperor Tiberius, an imperial dreamscape of marble colonnades, perfumed pools, and halls where music and murmurs echo day and night. But the beauty here is skin deep. The island is less a palace and more a slow-motion trap, and you, like Caligula, have just walked in. This is Villa Jovis, the Villa of Jupiter, where Tiberius reigns in absentia from Rome, surrounded by astrologers, yes-men, and a staff so terrified that they bow before their own reflections just in case. It's where politics comes to retire, or to be quietly snuffed out behind heavy velvet curtains. And Caligula, barely out of adolescence, is living here. Tiberius doesn't exactly mentor him. He tests him, pokes him like a snake in a jar. Some days the old emperor offers him books and pearls of stoic wisdom. Other days he parades condemned men in front of him and asks if mercy or entertainment is the better path. You never quite know what's real and what's a lesson. The air smells like rose water, but the tension is iron. Caligula learns quickly. Never volunteer, never flinch, never be interesting unless asked. He becomes a shadow in silk. Historians still argue whether he truly feared Tiberius or merely studied him. But what's certain is that he watched the old man with unnerving precision. Every word, every sigh, every moment of cruelty justified as policy. It all went in. One servant later described Caligula during this time as a serpent fattened on the milk of fear. A little dramatic maybe, but not entirely wrong. At night, you pass him walking the halls barefoot, memorizing which floor tiles creak. You see him smile at a eunuch who once insulted his uncle. Later that month, the eunuch is sent to a post in the Syrian desert. No announcement, no farewell, just gone. It's not a killing, it's worse. It's banishment with a scented envelope. And still Tiberius keeps him close. Perhaps he finds it amusing, or maybe he thinks the boy has promise as a future puppet. Whatever the case, Caligula waits, listens, and survives. Meanwhile, Rome festers, the Senate grows restless under the weight of absentee rule. Grain riots flare, provinces mutter. Coins bear the emperor's image, but his absence leaves a vacuum, a silence that Caligula quietly fills with smiles and meaningless speeches. He plays innocent. He praises the Senate. He donates to temples, all while wearing robes stitched tighter than a conspiracy. Then, unexpectedly, a new player arrives, Gemellus, Tiberius's grandson, younger than Caligula, softer, a boy with a weak chin and a strong name. The island's political barometer swings violently. Will Gemellus inherit? Will Caligula? Will Tiberius, graying and gasping, finally name a successor? Spoiler. He doesn't. Instead, Tiberius falls ill. The emperor's breathing becomes ragged, his doctors fuss. The palace grows quiet like a theater waiting for the curtain to drop. And Caligula? He's right there beside the bed, silent, attentive, fingers curled like talons. When Tiberius finally dies, or seems to die, there's a brief moment of confusion. One account claims he stopped breathing and a servant ran off to announce his death. Then, just as the announcement reached the villa steps, Tiberius woke up, coughing, furious, and very much not dead. Awkward, Caligula, standing calmly beside him, doesn't panic. He simply smiles, says something polite, and leaves the room. Tiberius dies again the next day, for real this time. Historians still debate that moment. Was it an honest mistake? Or did someone make sure the old man didn't get a third chance? The sources don't agree. One suggests the pillow was pressed down a little longer the second time. But there's no evidence, just a long silence and a very smooth transition of power. So here you are, walking beside Caligula down the white marble steps of Capri. He is 24 years old. The empire is his. And after years of masks, exile, and survival, he's finally smiling for real. The Senate greets him with wild applause. The people cheer. The coins are minted. A festival begins. Rome has a new emperor, handsome, charming, and the beloved son of Germanicus. Everything is perfect. You should probably start worrying. You're standing in a Roman forum so packed with bodies you can barely move. Senators in spotless togas elbow bakers, poets, prostitutes, and pickpockets. The statue of Julius Caesar is garlanded with roses. Somewhere a trumpet sounds badly. And above it all, riding in a golden chariot pulled by 6 white horses, is Caligula. He doesn't wave. He doesn't need to. The crowd screams anyway, wild, unfiltered joy. The son of Germanicus has come home. The boy in the little boots is now the master of the world, and for the first few months it's almost frightening how good he is at it. He pardons political exiles. He recalls the bones of his mother and brothers, giving them state burials with eerie tenderness. He gives bonuses to soldiers, reduces taxes, and hosts lavish games that outshine even Augustus's finest. Rome practically bursts into tears of relief. You lean on a column and watch the senators fumble over each other to declare their loyalty. One of them faints, trying to outpraise the rest. Caligula just smiles. He's seen this play before, and for a while things are calm. The empire purrs under his touch like a lion that hasn't noticed the cage yet. Historians often call this the honeymoon phase. It lasts about 6 months. Then the fever hits, literally. Caligula falls gravely ill. Some say it was poisoning. Others suspect epilepsy or encephalitis or just sheer exhaustion from trying to pretend to be sane for too long. Whatever it is, it nearly kills him. He slips into delirium, his attendants whisper prayers, Rome holds its breath. And then one morning he wakes up. Alive, but different. You see it in his eyes first. That glassy, too wide stare, the smile that doesn't quite match the moment. The way he speaks to empty rooms or stares too long at statues as if waiting for them to blink. Senators exchange glances, servants scurry faster. His horse, Incitatus, gets a marble stall and a jeweled collar. Oh yes, we're going there. Caligula emerges from his sickbed convinced, or pretending, that he has become a god. Not in the poetic, divinely chosen way that emperors often flirt with, but in the full sandals on the table, lightning bolt wielding kind of way. He begins referring to himself as a living deity, orders temples to be built in his honor, declares his sister Drusilla a goddess, then mourns her like a lover when she dies. And this isn't just grief, it's spectacle. You sit in the Senate chamber as he floats in, dressed in gold, eyes blank, declaring that Jupiter is jealous of his divine handsomeness. One senator dares to chuckle. The man disappears the next morning. Historians still argue whether Caligula truly believed he was divine or if he was just forcing Rome to participate in the world's most dangerous improv show. The line between performance and belief was always thin in Rome, but Caligula rips it apart like cheap papyrus. You begin to notice how the city changes. Statues of Jupiter start losing their heads, replaced by marble versions of Caligula's face. People stop saying "by the gods" and start muttering "by the gods," singular, eyes darting. The temples echo with confusion. And all the while he smiles. There's a story, maybe true, maybe not, that he once stood in the temple of Castor and Pollux, looked up at the statues and told them to step aside because he needed the space. Then he climbed the altar and sat between them, arms wide. "Now this is symmetry," he said. You begin to wonder if Rome has gone mad with him, or if it's just gotten really, really good at pretending. Because here's the dark truth no one likes to admit. For all his absurdity, Caligula functions. The grain still arrives, the armies still obey. The empire somehow does not collapse, not yet. He rules with velvet gloves. Until he doesn't. And in that sliver of peace after his illness, when the gods still seem amused, you think maybe, just maybe, he believes he's doing the empire a favor by staying alive. You're in the imperial stables now, and things have gotten weird. The horse's name is Incitatus. He has a marble stall, an ivory manger, a collar of gemstones, and 8 servants. His oats are mixed with flakes of gold, which is honestly terrible for digestion, but excellent for headlines. The walls around his enclosure are lined with purple drapery, the kind normally reserved for emperors and gods. And at the center of it all stands Caligula, smiling like he just solved philosophy. He leans down and whispers to Incitatus, stroking the stallion's mane like it's sacred linen. Then, without blinking, he turns to a group of stunned senators and announces, "I'm considering making him consul." You try not to laugh. The senators try harder. No one succeeds. This is the kind of anecdote Roman historians salivate over. And yes, fringe scholars still argue whether Caligula ever seriously intended to appoint a horse to high office, or whether it was an elaborate insult aimed at the Senate, a middle finger wrapped in velvet. Because here's the joke. Caligula may be insane, but he's not stupid. He knows the Senate is packed with bootlickers and backstabbers who spent decades flattering Tiberius while grumbling into their wine. By threatening to elevate a literal horse above them, he exposes the absurdity of Roman politics. It's petty, it's cruel, it's kind of genius, and it's terrifying. You're sitting in the Senate chamber when Incitatus is trotted in during a public audience, hooves polished, tail braided with silver. Caligula introduces him as my equal in spirit, superior in loyalty. One senator nods so enthusiastically you worry he'll sprain something. Another pretends to take notes, just to avoid eye contact. This isn't just theater, it's control. Caligula builds layers of absurdity not to mask his madness, but to make questioning him feel mad. Every time someone raises a concern, he doubles down. His logic spirals like a marble down a drain. If the gods are real and I am one, then why not a horse as consul? Is that so strange? Didn't Romulus descend from a she-wolf? You catch yourself almost agreeing. That's the danger. Meanwhile, Rome becomes a stage. Caligula performs devotion in ways no emperor before him dared. He shows up to religious festivals dressed as Mercury, complete with winged sandals. He reenacts divine battles in public squares. He installs golden statues of himself in temples and demands that Jews and Christians bow to them, causing chaos in Judea. Historians still argue whether these actions were pure ego or deliberate provocations. Was Caligula targeting religious minorities or simply playing a part he didn't believe in himself? There's no consensus, just fragments of scrolls and 1,000 nervous guesses. You walk beside him during a midnight inspection of his private amphitheater. He stops suddenly, stares at the moon and asks if it's been spying on him. The guards shift uneasily, no one speaks. Then as quickly as the storm rises, it passes. He chuckles, tosses a coin into the bushes and walks on. You realize he knows when he's making people uncomfortable. And he likes it. There's another story, almost too absurd to be real, that he once invited the Senate to watch him dance, not as part of a ceremony, just for fun. He wore a tunic of transparent silk, played the lyre badly and pirouetted like a drunken swan. When he finished, the room applauded like their pensions depended on it. Because they did. You begin to see the pattern. Caligula isn't just playing God. He's playing audience, playwright, and critic, and anyone who refuses to clap becomes part of the next act. By the time you return to the palace, even the statues seem wary. The busts of previous emperors have been moved to the atrium, each with a little scroll tucked beside them, containing notes from Caligula on how they could have ruled better. You reach for one scroll. It simply says, "Smile more." This is what Rome looks like under a ruler who believes himself divine, superior to all law, and surrounded by fools. And the terrifying part, no one's stopping him. You're invited to dinner tonight, which sounds delightful until you realize who's hosting. The palace glows with lamplight as you step into a dining hall, so grand it feels more like a hallucination. The ceilings shimmer with inlaid pearls. The couches are padded with imported swan feathers. Musicians play eerie, droning melodies in a minor key. And the guest list? Questionable. You find your seat, and as you settle in, you notice something peculiar. There are nameplates beside each dish. Not unusual until you read them. One is labeled Hannibal, another Alexander, a third says Medea. Then you glance up and realize some of Caligula's dinner guests tonight are dead. Well, symbolically. He's arranged busts and masks to represent famous historical and mythical figures, heroes, villains, even gods. They sit beside living senators. who shift uncomfortably as Caligula pours wine into empty cups and nods solemnly at ghosts. He toasts Achilles and discusses politics with Julius Caesar's marble head. You naturally pretend this is all very normal. He raises a goblet and says we dine together because we understand each other. We change the world, isn't that right, Hannibal? The bust says nothing. Caligula laughs anyway. You reach for your wine a little faster than usual. Historians still argue whether these ghost banquets were symbolic displays of megalomania or meticulously planned power plays. Some say he used the dead as metaphors, comparing himself to them in exaggerated humility. Others claim it was a test. He wanted to see who would laugh, who would freeze, who would pretend to speak with Socrates. You keep your face neutral. The man beside you begins quoting Homer to a papier-mâché Plato, and then mid-meal Caligula shifts. He grows quiet. His smile fades. He turns to a senator and says, "Do you know what I could do to you right now?" The senator stammers, "I could have you gutted and your bones turned into furniture," Caligula says, "and tomorrow the people would cheer as if nothing happened." He says it gently, like a bedtime story. No one breathes. Then he laughs, claps his hands, and the musicians strike up a new tune. But the air has changed. The food tastes like sawdust. You understand now. This isn't just a dinner. It's theater, ritual, and psychological warfare. Later, as the guests stagger out, you catch whispers. He's mad. He's blessed by the gods. He's testing us. But no one says anything out loud, because to say the emperor is mad is to say you're next. There's a story from this period, strange even by Roman standards, that Caligula once invited a man to dinner, treated him as an honored guest, and then casually had him executed before dessert. Why? Because he was bored? Or because the man once rolled his eyes too hard? Or because he wanted to make a point? The records don't agree, but everyone agrees on this. After that, no one ever relaxed at dinner again. You trail him through a side corridor after the feast where he pauses by a mirror and stares at himself. "You know," he mutters, "I think people fear me. Good." Then he turns and smiles like it's a compliment. The palace walls seem to lean in as he walks past. Every echo feels deliberate. In the days that follow, banquets become performance art. He demands applause for every bite of fruit. He forces senators to sing. Once, he serves an entire meal made of wax replicas, food no one can eat, just to watch their reactions. One man breaks a tooth trying, the rest applaud. Caligula starts having statues of himself placed at actual banquets to stand in for him when he's not in the mood. Sometimes they wear masks of gods. Sometimes they're just empty robes. Either way, guests are expected to toast them. You start to wonder if anyone is still certain where the line between real and performance lies. Because the longer this goes on, the more it becomes clear. This isn't just madness. It's power used like a paintbrush. And Rome? Rome is the canvas. You're marching along the windswept shores of Gaul, armor rattling, feet aching, with 100 other legionaries just as confused as you are. Somewhere ahead, Caligula rides on a white stallion. draped in a glittering cape that looks suspiciously like it was stolen from a theater production of The Odyssey. He's shouting orders no one understands. The air smells like salt and absurdity. You've come to wage war against the ocean. Caligula, in all his divine clarity, has declared Neptune, the god of the sea, his enemy. Why? It depends who you ask. Some say he wanted to punish the sea for nearly drowning him years earlier. Others claim it was a distraction from mutinous grumblings, and fringe historians whisper that he simply liked the idea of declaring war on something that couldn't answer back. You stand at attention as he commands the soldiers to form battle lines facing the crashing waves. A trumpet sounds, swords are raised, and then chaos. Not the glorious kind, the confusing kind. You charge into the surf. Some soldiers stab the water. Others scoop handfuls of foam into jars. Caligula, watching from the dunes, claps like a delighted child. When enough sand has been kicked and seashells collected, he declares victory. The trophies? Piles of ocean debris, barnacles, driftwood, a few unlucky crabs. Back in Rome, the official report reads, "The Emperor has triumphed over Neptune. The sea has surrendered its treasures." You don't know whether to laugh or start digging your own grave. Historians still debate whether this war was a symbolic act, perhaps intended to mock Rome's military obsession, or if it was a visible crack in Caligula's already fragile psyche. Either way, the implications are moist. But Caligula doesn't stop there. Flush with triumph, he orders the construction of a massive lighthouse in Gaul to commemorate the great battle. He also commands a temple be built, not to Neptune, but to himself, the conqueror of the sea. Offerings include pearls, drowned fish, and once, a very confused dolphin carved out of marble. You're back in Rome now, and the soldiers return parading baskets of seashells like sacred relics. The Senate claps. The people cheer. You're not sure if it's enthusiasm or pure survival instinct. Maybe both, but behind the curtains things are fraying. You overhear a general mutter, "If he declares war on the wind next, I'm deserting." Another jokes about training eagles to sue the emperor. They both stop laughing when a servant walks by. You pretend to tie your sandal until they move on. Caligula, meanwhile, seems energized. He starts speaking in riddles, making decisions based on omens that only he can interpret. Once he halts a grain shipment because the birds in the forum looked at him sideways. Another time he exiles a governor because his dream included a cucumber and a thunderclap. He builds more statues. Of himself, of Mars, of himself as Mars. They begin to clutter temples. One is installed in the Temple of Jerusalem, triggering a full-blown crisis that nearly sparks revolt. Only an emergency diplomatic maneuver prevents open rebellion. Caligula is reportedly furious that anyone would object to his face replacing their deities. You sit with the senator who quietly tears his toga fringe in stress. "It's not that he's mad," the man whispers. "It's that he's convinced we are." There's an eerie genius to it. If you force your entire empire to take a joke seriously, and they do, who's really the fool? And yet, even now, Caligula's grip holds. The roads still function, the taxes still roll in. The legions, baffled but loyal, keep marching. The bureaucratic machine Rome spent centuries building hums along like an ox with blinders on. That's the part no one talks about enough. The machine didn't need sanity at the wheel. It just needed someone to keep feeding the beast. And Caligula, he feeds it with flair. He even starts appearing in public dressed as a sea captain, trident in hand, dramatically retelling his victory over the waves to crowds of school children who've been ordered to clap. You watch as one kid sneezes. He's escorted out. This is the moment you realize something deeper. Caligula isn't pretending anymore. He believes the applause. Or worse, he doesn't care if it's real. Because if the god emperor says he defeated Neptune, who are you to say otherwise? You're wandering the palace gardens at dusk, where even the birds seem to hold their breath. The hedges are clipped into shapes of divine animals. Griffins, lions, maybe a few disgruntled senators if you squint. A soft fountain bubbles nearby, and Caligula walks just ahead of you, barefoot, holding a fig in one hand and humming something off-key. He's not alone. Beside him walks Drusilla, his sister. She's beautiful, sharp, and possibly the only person he trusts. That is, if trust is still a word that means anything in this household. And here's where things get uncomfortable. You start hearing the rumors first, whispers carried through marble corridors, that Caligula spends more time with Drusilla than with his wife, that he sometimes introduces her as my wife, sometimes my goddess, sometimes just mine. There are stories of banquets where they sit too close, of rooms that lock from the inside, of nights that end in quiet sobbing from servants. Historians still argue whether the relationship between Caligula and Drusilla was incestuous, exaggerated, or just deeply codependent. The evidence is foggy, laced with bias and political venom. But what's clear is this: their bond unnerved everyone. And then suddenly she dies. You're in the palace when the screaming starts. Caligula vanishes into his chambers for days, refusing food, light, even the company of his favorite entertainers. When he finally emerges, he's dressed in black, rare and ominous for a Roman emperor, and declares an official period of mourning. All public business halts. Festivals are canceled. A senator who smiles too brightly is arrested. The empire wears grief like a costume, and anyone who doesn't mourn convincingly is accused of treason. You attend the funeral. Drusilla's bier is carried through the streets beneath a sky heavy with smoke and incense. Caligula follows barefoot, face blank. At the forum, he raises his arms and declares her a goddess, divine, eternal, equal to Venus herself. A statue is erected, priests are appointed. Drusilla joins the Roman pantheon, and Caligula becomes the only living Roman to deify someone by sheer force of will and grief, or madness, or both. And here's the twist: many accept it. Because what's the alternative? To tell a god his sister isn't divine? But grief does something to Caligula. It doesn't break him, it distills him. He grows crueler, more unpredictable. He begins demanding that other noble women visit his chambers. Some return with bruises, others not at all. He marries, divorces, remarries again within months, each time staging absurd, expensive ceremonies that border on parody. There's the time he marries a senator's wife on a whim. then boasts publicly about their wedding night at the next Senate session. Another time he crashes a wedding banquet, declares the bride too beautiful for anyone else, and takes her home that night. You were there. You remember the silence that followed. It was the silence of a city learning not to hope. His palace becomes a labyrinth of sensual confusion. Marble walls echoing with flutes, silk curtains hiding masked dancers, and laughter that never quite reaches the eyes. One night he orders his guards to pick 3 men at random and execute them. No reason, no trial. Just to remind everyone that mercy is not a right, it's a mood. You begin to notice how senators walk differently now. Careful, head slightly down, hands never in fists. The city holds its breath every morning, waiting for the next whim. Because it is whim, and it all radiates from Caligula's growing belief that he is not just emperor, but something beyond human, something chosen, something owed. The statues multiply, not just of him, but of Drusilla too, in temples, in fountains, in the pockets of public officials who carry miniature versions just to be safe. Historians still puzzle over this phase, whether Caligula was mourning, unraveling, or simply rewriting the laws of family, faith, and power in ways Rome could not stomach. Or maybe like a child rearranging dolls in a burning nursery. He just wanted the world to reflect the chaos inside his skull. But no one dares say it out loud. Because in Rome, even grief has a price. And Caligula, he's still collecting. You're standing inside one of Caligula's newest constructions, a pleasure palace that feels more dream than dwelling. The walls aren't just painted, they shimmer. The floors are a mosaic of myth, gods entangled in battles and embraces. Every ceiling is mirrored, every torch casts 4 shadows, every hallway feels like it might blink. You don't know what's more unsettling, the grandeur, or the way it watches you back. Caligula calls this place his House of Echoes, though no one's sure if that's a joke or a threat. The rumors say he wanders the halls late at night, speaking softly into the stone. Some claim he hears replies. Others swear the walls whisper even when he doesn't. There are secret rooms, hidden doors, trap floors made of shifting glass tiles, and statues, hundreds of them, some finished, some broken, some recarved to wear Caligula's face over the original. You pass a Venus whose features have been replaced with his sister's. You pass a Mars who bears Caligula's sneer. And in the center of it all, a massive statue of Caligula as Apollo holding a lyre in one hand and a scroll in the other. The scroll reads, "What I say is law, what I dream is truth." You pause. The statue's eyes seem to follow you. Welcome to the Palace of Panic. Rome's upper class begins to panic too, but softly. Politicians speak in code. Friends stop visiting each other. Letters arrive with fewer words and more blanks. Even jesters start censoring their jokes. There's a new etiquette now. Never be too happy. Never be too sad. Never mention food poisoning unless you're willing to accuse Neptune again. You visit a senator who's been summoned twice this week and aged 10 years in the process. Every room has eyes, he whispers. I bowed to a bust yesterday because I wasn't sure. It's not just paranoia, Caligula is actively cultivating it. He installs spies within his own staff, then tells them they're being watched too. He accuses senators of conspiracies, then punishes them for not knowing they were involved. Once, he invites 3 men to dinner and has one executed halfway through for having a treasonous face. Historians still argue whether this was calculated tyranny or psychological collapse. Did he truly believe the walls were listening, or did he just want you to believe it? Either way, the outcome is the same: total freezing fear. He builds a new temple in his private palace, not to Jupiter or Mars, but to himself. Visitors must bring offerings, bow, and sometimes sing hymns of his own composition. You've never seen a less enthusiastic choir, and yet people obey. Because behind the madness is an engine of real consequences. Land can be confiscated in seconds. A family name can be erased with a signature. One man suspected of harboring an unloyal dream is forced to walk the city barefoot in winter, carrying a bronze bust of the emperor until he collapses. Even nature starts to feel choreographed. Caligula reportedly orders a section of the Tiber River diverted to create a private fish pond shaped like his initials. He imports exotic animals not for sport, but for silent, eerie company. Flamingos stalk through his garden like living ornaments. You attend a performance staged by Caligula himself. He plays all the roles. He sings, he fights, he dies, he resurrects. The audience claps for 10 straight minutes. One woman faints from sheer anxiety. He steps down from the stage and hands her a rose, then has her arrested for stealing the spotlight. It's not a metaphor. It's Rome. You begin to see how deep the dread runs. Bakers undercook bread so that their crusts don't resemble his profile. Children are taught to chant his full list of titles before bedtime. A senator commissions a portrait of the emperor onto the soles of his sandals, so that every step he takes is legally an act of devotion. And through it all, Caligula smiles. He no longer makes decisions with policy in mind. He makes them like a child twisting the wings off flies, curious to see if they'll still buzz. He appoints criminals to high office, then executes them for being criminals. He lowers taxes for the poor, then punishes them for not spending fast enough. Because what is Rome if not his personal marble maze? The walls don't just have eyes anymore. They have your name. You're sitting in the upper tier of the Colosseum, not the big stone wonder we all know, but its humbler predecessor. It's hot, the air thick with sweat and baked olive oil, and everyone around you is pretending to enjoy the show. Down below, gladiators perform sluggishly, animals refuse to fight, and the crowd claps on cue. No one's here for entertainment. They're here for surveillance. Because Caligula is watching. Not from the imperial box, though, not today. Today he's in disguise, so the rumor goes, somewhere in the crowd just to see who really claps, who smiles too wide, and who forgets to cheer when a lion flinches. One poor soul to your left has broken into a panicked sweat, torn between vomiting and applauding. You offer him your water flask. He politely declines. Could be poisoned, after all. This is Rome under Caligula now. The rules shift daily. What was loyalty yesterday is lèse-majesté today. And yet, the empire holds. Historians are baffled by this. How did the machinery keep turning? How did senators, merchants, governors, even poets keep the system intact under a man who once declared war on the moon? The answer, oddly, is fear. But not just personal fear, systemic fear. The kind that seeps into marble and memory. The kind that doesn't just punish resistance, but punishes thinking about resistance. You walk the forum and feel it in the silence. Where once orators roared, now they whisper. Public scrolls are revised hourly. Coins stamped with Caligula's face are kissed, not spent. One baker sculpts his loaves to resemble the emperor's nose just to be safe. And yet, it's not all chaos. The aqueducts still run. The legions still march, the provincial governors still collect taxes, some even report increased efficiency. The system is so massive, so institutionalized, it continues to function even when the top is rotten. Rome, it turns out, doesn't need sanity. It just needs momentum. Caligula, for all his instability, is still technically a Roman emperor. His edicts are binding, his taxes fund the navy, his guards enforce the law, his rituals, bizarre though they are, still follow enough of the old form to remain just within the limits of procedure. And everyone else? They adapt. You watch as a senator rehearses his morning greeting 12 times before entering the palace. A general commissions an astrologer to interpret Caligula's facial expressions. The head priest of Jupiter builds a side altar to Caligula and prays to both, just in case. Even the rats seem more cautious. One morning, Caligula wakes up and decides he's bored of stairs. So he orders a mile-long floating bridge built across the Bay of Baiae, just so he can ride his horse back and forth in full military armor, declaring a new conquest every few steps. Engineers grumble, slaves labor. It happens. The bridge floats. The emperor rides, Rome applauds. You ask yourself, is this devotion or exhaustion? There's a story of a man named Ptolemaeus, an ex-governor from Mauritania summoned to Rome. At dinner, he arrives in a cloak lined with purple, a gift from his homeland, a mark of status. Caligula spots it, smiles, says nothing. The next day, Ptolemaeus is executed. Why? Because only he wears purple. That's it. That's the reason. Word spreads. People burn their clothes. Tailors weep. Purple dye merchants mysteriously pivot to beige. The emperor never says anything about it again. You pass a group of musicians practicing a hymn praising Caligula's silence, which is funny because he hasn't been quiet once in 3 years. And yet, you start to understand. This isn't madness alone. It's a design. The unpredictability is the point. If the emperor's moods are unknowable, then every citizen becomes their own jailer. Historians still debate whether the population truly believed Caligula was a god, or simply acted like they did. Either way, the effect is the same. Fear becomes faith. Performance becomes prayer. And Rome survives not because it's stable, but because it's so broken it loops back into working. You end the day in the shadow of the Senate House. Its doors are shut. Inside, laws are being passed. Or not. You don't really know anymore. What you do know is this: the torches still burn. The records are still kept, and if anyone asks how things are going, you smile and say, "As the gods will it." You're drifting through the marble halls of Rome's imperial bureaucracy, and it's disturbingly efficient. Scrolls are filed, ledgers balanced, messengers zip from one wing to another like bees in a hive. If you didn't know better, you'd think the empire was thriving under calm, measured leadership. But then you glance out the window and spot Caligula in the courtyard, pretending to referee a wrestling match between two elderly senators dressed in togas soaked with olive oil. This is the paradox that keeps historians up at night. Why didn't anyone stop him? You would think, after the mock wars, the god complex, the horse senator, the ghost banquets, and the execution by facial expression, anyone would have stepped in. A noble rebellion, a brave Senate resolution, a heroic general riding into Rome to restore order. You know, the usual Roman drama. But none of that happened, not for years. Because here's the truth. Rome wasn't ruled by one man. It was ruled by an entire system designed to protect itself. And that system, of fear, favors, inertia, and paperwork, was perfectly capable of surviving a mad emperor, so long as he didn't stop the grain shipments. And Caligula, he knew that. You walk past a scribe who's been working 12-hour days drafting decrees that make absolutely no sense. One of them forbids sneezing during eclipses. Another reclassifies lettuce as a military asset. He doesn't question them. He just writes. People follow orders because they're afraid, but also because it's easier, safer, more logical to play along with illogic than to become the nail that sticks out. Rome had learned that lesson under Tiberius and under Augustus before him. Don't resist. Adapt. You sit in on a Senate session where the agenda includes a motion to declare Caligula's bathwater sacred. One man hesitates during the vote. The next day he's reassigned to an obscure posting near the edge of the Black Sea. Promoted, the record says. There's a governor in Hispania who keeps 3 portraits in his home. One of Jupiter, one of Augustus, and one of Caligula with a candle always lit beneath it. You ask him why. He shrugs. The first 2 are for faith, he says. The last one is for insurance. And what about the Praetorian Guard, the emperor's own elite bodyguards? Surely they had the power to act. Well, yes, but they also had pay raises, luxury barracks, and a very recent reminder of what happened to people who displeased the emperor. Caligula had doubled their salaries. He called their commander my shield and shadow. He even made sure they got front-row seats at the gladiator games. Bribes? Maybe. Loyalty? Possibly. Fear? Definitely. Historians still argue whether the guard loved him, feared him, or just waited until the wine ran out. Even the people, the ordinary Romans in the street, were complicit in their own way. Bread and circuses kept flowing. Caligula threw festivals so opulent they made Saturnalia look like a child's birthday party. He flooded entire amphitheaters to reenact naval battles. He hosted lotteries where the prize was actual land, and sometimes accidentally a debt. You talk to a fishmonger who tells you he's mad, sure, but mad emperors don't tax fish. Then he hands you a trout and goes back to singing hymns about divine vinegar. And so the years stretch on, because in Rome, stability didn't always mean peace. It meant predictability. And Caligula somehow became predictable in his unpredictability. He made Rome flinch, and flinching became the norm. You visit a priest who privately admits he no longer believes in the gods. "But I still bow to Caligula," he says. "He's the only one that answers." By now, you see it clearly. No one stopped him because everyone was waiting for someone else to start. And the longer they waited, the more absurdity became reality. Even the historians, the ones who would later write about this time, struggled to separate fact from fever dream. Suetonius, Cassius Dio, even Seneca, they all had to guess, piece together scraps, try to make sense of an empire that had willingly handed itself to a storm in a toga. So no, there was no brave senator standing on a table screaming, "Enough!" There was no coup in the night, no dramatic standoff with a blade pressed to a throat. There was just silence, and the sound of sandals squeaking on marble, trying not to echo too loudly. You're backstage at the Palace Theater. Not an actual theater, mind you, but a newly remodeled wing with red velvet seats and gold leaf everything, designed purely for Caligula's private performances. Today's audience? A carefully selected lineup of senators, soldiers, and sycophants. Today's show? Whatever the emperor feels like. He steps onto the stage wearing a cape that seems to be stitched with actual coins. His makeup glints in the lamplight. He raises a wooden sword and dramatically declares, "I, Jupiter reborn, have conquered fate itself." Then he stabs a loaf of bread. The audience claps as if thunder just cracked the heavens. But somewhere behind the applause, finally, daggers are being sharpened. Because here's the secret Rome doesn't admit out loud. No empire can run on fear forever. Even the most obedient dog will bite if kicked enough. Even marble cracks under too much weight. And Caligula, he's been kicking for years. You're in the forum the day the whispers shift tone. A senator leans close to a praetorian, not too close, and says, "Do you ever miss order?" Not, "Do you want to kill him?" Not, "Let's rebel." Just nostalgia. That's how it starts. With longing. With memory. The conspirators aren't brave. They're tired. Tired of performing sanity in an empire that rewards insanity. Tired of praising divine plays that end with citizens as punchlines. Tired of waking up every day wondering if a poorly timed sneeze might cost their head. And so, a plan begins to form. Historians still debate when the first real meeting happened. Some say it was over a shared meal. Others place it at the temple of Castor and Pollux under cover of incense smoke. But they agree on the names. Cassius Chaerea, a veteran officer in the Praetorian Guard, often mocked by Caligula for his feminine voice. Senators who'd been humiliated at banquets. Former allies turned silent hostages. Even a few slaves knew something was coming. They passed glances in corridors, timed footsteps to avoid eavesdropping. But no one said the word assassination. You watch the plan unfold not in fire or swords, but in silence. A calendar is marked. A corridor is chosen. The upcoming theater festival provides the perfect cover. Caligula, bored of his own palace, insists on attending the performance himself. He has no idea the day arrives. You're there standing in a side hallway of the imperial compound, surrounded by thick stone walls and echoing footsteps. The emperor strides in, dressed absurdly, muttering something about the moon being late. He's flanked by a handful of guards, but none loyal enough to stop what's coming. Cassius Chaerea steps forward. Caligula rolls his eyes, probably expecting another crude joke or an exaggerated salute. Instead, Chaerea stabs him in the neck. No fanfare, no final curse, just a wet gasp and chaos. Other conspirators rush in, blades flashing. It's not quick. It's not elegant. It's desperate. Caligula stumbles, blood painting the marble, still trying to speak. One last attempt at theater. One final line. But Rome is already turning the page. When it's over, the silence is louder than the scream that never came. You don't cheer, you just stand there surrounded by red footprints and broken gold, wondering if the nightmare is really over. Spoiler, it isn't. Because the body may be gone, but the damage, that's harder to bury. You're standing in the Imperial Garden again, same roses, same marble fountains, but now the air feels hollow. The Emperor is dead. The throne is empty. The birds, oblivious, keep singing. And yet Rome does not erupt into celebration. There are no street parades, no spontaneous chants of freedom. Instead, there's hesitation, nervous glances, a pause that stretches like wet parchment, as if the entire city is asking itself, what happens now? You'd think removing a tyrant would bring clarity, justice, even relief. But Rome isn't built for clean endings, it's built for survival. You wander past the theater where Caligula fell. The marble has been scrubbed, the blood gone, but there's still a stain, psychological, unspoken. A few guards linger nearby, hands on hilts, unsure whether to protect the corpse or deny it ever existed. The Senate moves quickly, of course. Within hours, speeches are given praising the necessary action taken to restore reason. Laws are proposed to erase Caligula's decrees. His likeness is removed from statues, coins, and public murals. But there's a problem. A big, wriggling, imperial-sized problem named Claudius, Caligula's uncle. Awkward, limping, stammering, a man most considered harmless, or at least harmlessly weird. He'd survived the purges by being so thoroughly underestimated that people forgot he had a pulse. But now he's found hiding behind a curtain in the palace, shaking and clutching a scroll of Cicero's on duties. A soldier recognizes him, doesn't kill him. Instead, he bows. By nightfall, Claudius is declared emperor. Historians still argue whether this was planned, if the guard always meant to install someone pliable, or if it was a spontaneous bid for continuity. Either way, it works. Rome exhales, temporarily. Because here's the twist, Claudius isn't the fool everyone thought he was. He wastes no time. He restores order, reopens the courts, reorganizes the grain supply, even expands the empire. But when asked about Caligula, he avoids eye contact, doesn't speak the name. Instead, he simply says, "Let Rome remember what it must, and forget what it can." And so begins the great forgetting. You walk the streets and hear children asking who the last emperor was. Their parents say, Germanicus's son, and leave it there. Temples quietly remove his deified sister's name from the rolls. The busts are smashed or buried. Even the Senate records redact his more absurd edicts, sometimes replacing them with footnotes that just say rescinded. The historians of the day, Suetonius, Tacitus, Josephus, All struggle with the same problem. How do you document a reign so surreal that people would rather erase it than explain it? You sit with the scribe who shows you a scroll with Caligula's name scratched out in thick red ink. "I didn't cross it out," he says softly. "It came to me that way." Because Caligula didn't just die, he infected the memory of Rome. People stopped speaking about the floating bridge, the horse senator, the war against Neptune, not because they weren't real, but because remembering them makes everything else seem too fragile. If the world allowed that to happen, what else might it allow? And yet, you see the echoes everywhere. A street performer dressed in a golden toga, dancing until the guards arrive. A child's rhyme that ends with, "Or Caligula will hear you." A stray coin in the gutter, his face barely visible through the dirt. Memory, it turns out, is as stubborn as marble. You pass a man in the market who swears he once saw Caligula fly. "He had wings," the man insists, "like Icarus, made of silver." You smile, nod, and move on, because maybe it's not about truth anymore. Maybe it never was. Rome moves forward, yes, but the scar remains. A reminder carved not just into history, but into the psychological bedrock of the empire. A whisper. It happened once. It could happen again. You're walking the Palatine Hill under a sky smeared with dawn, and for once, it's quiet. Rome hasn't fully woken yet. The baths are still cold, the bread ovens not quite roaring. Statues cast long, sleepy shadows across courtyards. Still damp with dew. This is the hour before the mask goes back on. You pass the ruins of Caligula's private residence. A few weeds poke through the cracked tiles. A bird has built a nest in the empty eye socket of a shattered bust, and for a moment the empire feels peaceful. But that's the illusion, isn't it? Because even now, decades after Caligula's death, Rome doesn't truly know what to make of him. Madman, martyr, monster? The documents argue in circles, the rumors stretch further than his borders ever did, and historians, bless them, still debate the same tired questions. Was he mentally ill? Was he abused? Was he simply a man who mistook applause for love? You find yourself circling that question too. Was Caligula truly insane? Or was he Rome's reflection at its most indulgent, most paranoid, most performative? He didn't invent imperial excess. Augustus played God with better lighting. He didn't invent fear. Tiberius had people executed for bad vibes and vague astrology. What Caligula did was strip the theater bare. He turned the absurdities of power into spectacle and forced the world to clap along or die trying. He exposed the architecture of obedience, and Rome let him. Because Rome didn't want a god, it wanted a distraction. It wanted blood in the arena and golden banquets and someone to blame when the taxes rose. And when that someone went too far, when the curtain finally fell, Rome buried the script and claimed it had never seen the play. But plays leave echoes. You walk past a fountain dedicated to divine order restored. No mention of who broke it, just a plaque that promises stability like a bandage over a dream. And here's the thing. Caligula ruled for just under 4 years. That's it. Fewer years than Nero's fiddle, fewer than Domitian's paranoia, but somehow more enduring in the imagination. Because he didn't just wield power, he played with it, twisted it into knots, threw it back in Rome's face, grinning, daring anyone to say it wasn't working. And they didn't, not until it was too late. Even now, scholars argue over details. Did he really threaten to make his horse consul? Did he truly believe he was Jupiter? Did he sleep with the moon or merely declare it his mistress? Maybe none of it matters. Because Caligula's legacy isn't in what's proven, it's in what was possible. He made the empire doubt its own reality. And in doing so, proved just how thin the line is between rule and illusion, between law and whim, between sanity and strategy. You find a cracked coin on the ground, barely legible. A faint profile, a hint of laurel. You can't tell if it's Caligula's face or just time playing tricks again. You pocket it anyway, because history never forgets, it just waits to be noticed again. And now, as we step away from the marble halls and shifting shadows of Caligula's Rome, let your breath slow. Let the noise of power, pageantry, and paranoia fade into a gentle hum. Like distant footsteps on mosaic floors no one sweeps anymore. Picture the empire at night under a sky scattered with stars. The candles are out, the masks set down, the courtiers asleep in their beds, dreaming safe dreams now that the emperor is no longer listening. Even the statues seem to rest, their stony eyes softened by moonlight. The fountains bubble gently. The wind moves quietly through the olive trees. Somewhere a lute plays a tune you almost remember. The notes soft and circular like the turning of time. Because that's what time does. It turns. It doesn't always correct. It doesn't always heal. But it moves forward whether emperors rise or fall, whether coins are minted or faces are chiseled away. So let that movement carry you now. Let your mind drift from the noise of power games and palace walls. Let the names blur, the echoes soften, and your shoulders sink deeper into the comfort of the present moment. You're safe, you're here, you're far from the empire now.